Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome virtually to the Riverdale Jewish Center for the highlight of our Pre-Pesach education series. We are thrilled that many of you have been joining us regularly to prepare for Pesach together, but especially to welcome so many new faces to be with us this evening for a special night of learning with Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman. Before we begin, just two technical notes about tonight. First, if you're still searching for our RJC Pre-Pesach resource guide, it's available on the website, but also here in the chat for those who haven't seen it already. In addition, Rabbi Berman's presentation this evening will include a source sheet that he was kind enough to share with us. You're able to download the source sheet either from our website or again, the link is here in the chat box as well. So during these few minutes of introduction, please take a moment to open the chat and download the source sheet so that you're able to follow along with Rabbi Berman's presentation this evening. We are incredibly grateful to Yeshiva University always for its deep connection to our shul and our community, way back from the days of Rabbi Sable to today. But that is especially true for us during this challenging year of the pandemic. Not only in Yeshiva's care for our students, but in addition, also its care for the broader community, the Orthodox community here in America and around the world. I know I speak for my rabbinic colleagues, but also for the rest of our community. The resources that Yeshiva has provided, the Rosh Yeshiva and their guidance throughout this pandemic have really been a tremendous asset and a tremendous source of comfort during these very, very difficult and challenging times. I would go through the list, that's really the truth, and identify so many of the deep connections that we have to Yeshiva here tonight, but I'm worried that I will probably leave someone off the list. If you go through the chat boxes, if you look at the names on the list, whether it be members of Yeshiva's board, members of the faculty, the administration, students, and alumni, so much of what the RJC is rooted in Yeshiva University, in its alumni, in its mission, and its values. And for that reason, we are so honored that each and every one of you is here with us to learn with Rabbi Berman, and we are so thrilled that Rabbi Berman is here tonight. I do want to highlight in particular, and I want to thank Michal Haas, whose dedication to Yeshiva is only matched by her dedication to the RJC. I want to thank her for helping make this evening's learning opportunity possible. One of the amazing things about Rabbi Berman, who I think needs no introduction this evening, is his incredible dedication to Torah teaching, in addition to the unbelievable amount of responsibility that he carries on his shoulders for our community. In addition to everything that Rabbi Berman does in representing Yeshiva, in guiding Yeshiva, and in leading Yeshiva, Rabbi Berman has also made it his mission to continue to teach Torah at the highest level, sharing Yeshiva's values through Yeshiva's rich tradition of high-level academic and religious Torah study. Wherever I go, it is a great privilege whenever I turn on my computer to see that Rabbi Berman is addressing shuls and institutions around the country and around the world. But in addition to that, Rabbi Berman is also in the Beis Medrash, delivering shiurim to the Rosh Yeshiva, delivering to the members of the Kollel and to the students. He embodies in such a tangible way everything that the Yeshiva represents and the incredible influence that Torah has had in inspiring our community in this generation. In addition, more personally, as an assistant rabbi at the Jewish Center for a number of years before arriving here in Riverdale, I know that much of what I downloaded and experienced as a rabbi there was a product of the high standard that Rabbi Berman set during his years as the rabbi of the Jewish Center. Some of it was more explicit, some of it was more implicit, but through it all, Rabbi Berman set a high standard there as he continues to set with this incredibly excellent administration and leadership and body of students that make Yeshiva what it is today. So for all those reasons and many more, it is a very special privilege for us, friends, alumni, faculty, administrators, and just admirers of Yeshiva, to be able to gather tonight to study before Pesach and to be able to welcome Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman to share words of Torah with us. We are so thankful that he's here, and we wish everyone to enjoy the shiur. Please make sure to download the source sheet from the chat box and turn it over right now to Rabbi Ari Berman.
Wow, okay. Thank you so much, Rabbi Zurgin. It is so wonderful to be here with you, to be here with my friends, at the RJC. I have to say, Yeshiva University is the flagship Jewish university, and the RJC is one of our flagship synagogues. The history that Rabbi Zirkin mentioned already, and the depth of feeling and closeness is really embodied by the shared values that we all embrace, and by which we live. So it's just a joy to be here with you. I see so many friends. Let me just say that just to be in the presence of Rabbi Zirkin and to watch him in his rabbin, it always gives me nachas. And knowing his great, what he did already at the Jewish Center and what he's doing at the Riverdale Jewish Center, it's just an incredible example of leadership, rabbinic leadership at the highest level, to which we at Yeshiva are so proud. And it's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Zirkin, for the invitation and for giving me this opportunity. It's also wonderful to be here with so many friends. I'm just coursing through, to acknowledge the presence of Rabbi Yitzi Ganak, so amazing, so wonderful. Mark Spear, the president, deeply connected to Yeshiva University, and it's great to see you. Our incredible trustee, Lou Bravman, I just saw his name over here. Lou was certainly here on time, and he'd appreciate if I ended early. So it is wonderful, wonderful to be in your presence. So many great Yeshiva University leaders are here. Rabbi Dr. Herb Dobrinsky, who carries the mantle as the most dedicated Yeshiva University alum and role model. And currently in our institution, just a joy to be here with you. Michal Haas was mentioned, incredible. My deputy chief of staff, she does such an amazing job for Yeshiva, for the Jewish people, as I know she does for the Riverdale Jewish Center. Really just an incredible, gifted professional. And all of my friends here, I see Joel Simon here. I love Joel Simon. Hello, Joel Simon. Just as wonderful people. Toby's here. I mean, it's just wonderful. I could just go on. It's just so nice to see everyone. I also appreciate that I'm the keynote of the Pesach pre-educational program. So I will try to take this responsibility to deliver a very important Pesach message, which I think is a message that really resonates with us today during this year. We've come to the year commemoration, I would say, not anniversary, of our beginning of COVID. This has been something that has hit our community deeply. I remember at 7:10 in the morning in the early March, I received a phone call from Governor Andrew Cuomo, and he said to me, it was like 7:10 in the morning, he said to me, Rabbi Berman, if I am calling you this early in the morning, it must be that I do not have good news. And he called to tell me that we have a student who tested positive for COVID. We were the first university on this side of the country. There was one in Washington State that had COVID. We're the first university that had a positive test for COVID. And immediately we moved into this totally unscripted world. What does that mean? What does quarantine mean? Do we close? How long do you stay open? What is social distancing? Nobody knew what that word meant. And I remember when that word was first introduced, because the Department of Health was embedded at Yeshiva University for days. And then within like 4 or 5 days, I said, you're going to have to start practicing social distancing. And that became a thing en masse, and the whole era of this past year. And one of the things that I think has really come up this past year in people's minds is a sort of recalibration about purpose and meaning. I think perhaps one of the questions when you speak to people deeply, that's on their minds, or it's been on their mind over this year, is why am I here? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Should I be doing something different? Professionally, personally? What's my mission? What's my goal? Like this year, in so many senses, has been like a long Yamim Noraim season, in which people are asking themselves profound questions because their whole lives have been shaken up. There's no routine anymore. You know, we often get stuck in our routine. There's no routine. So in a world with no routine, before we get to the new normal, it's very common for people to wonder, for each individual to wonder, am I in the place that I'm supposed to be? What's my purpose? What's my goal? So I wanna speak to this by way of talking about Pesach and the Haggadah, to talk about what I think uniquely in this generation is our goal. And I share this message not just with you, this is the message that I share with our students at Yeshiva University. When we educate the leaders in the world of tomorrow, what are the messages that fuel our mission? Very much it's this message. So let me begin with talking a little bit about the Haggadah. Who are the heroes of the Haggadah? I'll open that up. Rabbi Zirkin, are people allowed to talk here? Or is everybody?
At your own risk, Rabbi Berman.
They're all friends.
I believe they can unmute themselves.
Uh-oh. Okay. Shirley, just no gush talk here. So who are the heroes of the Haggadah? Who are the heroes of the Haggadah? Who would you say? Moshe. Moshe would be someone that we would naturally think he'd be a hero of the Haggadah. Interestingly,
Miriam.
Miriam, great. Moshe, Miriam, who else? Anybody else? Who else would be hero of the Haggadah?
Neither one of them is mentioned in the Haggadah.
So neither one is mentioned in the Haggadah, which really highlights Shirley's point, which highlights the absence and the vacuum. Exactly.
Thank you.
No, that's exactly the point.
Say yes, the Kadosh
Yes, the
Baruch Hu.
Kadosh Baruch Hu. Is the-
HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God certainly seems like a primary mover here.
The child at the table.
And he did it directly. You know, God is a primary mover. Okay, so God is a hero of the Haggadah. Anybody else? These are all right. Anybody else?
The child at the table.
The child at the table. Wow, that's a great answer. The child at the table is the hero of the Haggadah. That's awesome. I'll put that into my remarks. I love that. Child at the table. Okay. Paro, that's an interesting one.
The little goat of Haggadah.
Little goat of Haggadah. And who is that little goat of Haggadah?
It's Yisrael.
Am Yisrael. Yafeh. Wow, I'm taking notes. This is like great for the Seder. So Am Yisrael, the little goat, the little child. I think Paro is a unique answer in the chat. So I want to share with you who I think are at least one. All these are true, but one of the hidden heroes of the Haggadah, a hidden hero of the Haggadah. I'm pretty convinced about this. A hidden hero of the Haggadah. So let me begin. Rabbi Zirkin was kind enough to spread the source sheets. Everybody have the source sheets? I think it's better if you look at it yourselves, and I'll walk you through it than putting it on screen and crowding everybody out. So let's walk through the source sheets. If you look at source number 1. So source number 1, after the Manishtana, we're told about a group of rabbis who got together and they had a Seder in Bnei Brak. Rabbi Eliezer, Ma'aseh, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. By the way, does anybody want to read this in the tune of does anybody have a family tune that they want to read this in? This would be very helpful. We're always looking for new tunes. Anybody want to read? Anybody want to volunteer? A little family tune? Maisa Rabbi Eliezer? Okay, I'll give you my family tune. It's not so melodic. Maisa Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Shayim Esumim b'Bnei Brak, Vayimesapra Metzias Mitzrayim Kol Oso Alayla, Ad Shabbat Tamidem V'Amar Lehem Rabbi Seinu Gizman Kriya Shema Shel Shacharis. So what happened is that the 5 rabbis, and they stayed up all night, and they told over the story of Mitzrayim all night. They told over the story of Mitzrayim. This is famous, as we know. They told over the story of Mitzrayim. Now, what is less known is that there's a parallel text of a group of rabbis who also stayed up all night. Does anybody know a parallel text? This would be amazing if you knew this, by the way. Does anybody know a parallel text of a story of rabbis who stayed up all night on the night of Pesach? Okay, so by the way, in general, when I ask these kinds of questions, usually the answer is the next source. So you have there's a tip. So if you look at the next source, you'll see in the Tosefta that Maisa Rabbi Gamliel, Maisa Rabbi Gamliel, who's the Kanim Shem Mesubim bebeit Baitos ben Zonin belud, vayo asukin behilchos haPesach kol halayla, ad kros hagever, higbiu mufnei benadu v'hochalem lebeis hamidrash. There's a story of Rabbi Gamliel and the elders who were in Lud, and they didn't tell over the story of Mitzrayim all night. You know what they did all night? They learned the halachos of Pesach, which is the carbon Pesach. All night they learned the halachos of the carbon Pesach until the rooster crowed, and it was time to daven in the morning. Okay, so you have a very parallel story. Rabbi Gamliel and the rabbis, not in Bnei Brak, but in Lud. Why were they in Lud, by the way? Obviously, the El Al flight they were on was canceled. Okay, sadly, it didn't just start now. They were in Lud, and they were learning the Hilchos Pesach all night until the morning, and a rooster crowed. A very similar story. But in one of the stories, they were talking about the story of Mitzrayim, and in the other story, they were learning Hilchos Pesach. Hilchos Pesach. Now that's very important. And also the people who are the 2 different stories. Anybody know anything about Rabbi Gamliel on the one hand and Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah on the other hand? Anybody know anything about them? Okay, so these were all rabbis who lived in the same generation.
They're all part of the Sanhedrin.
All part of the Sanhedrin, excellent. Now, were they friends? But was Rabbi Gamliel friends with?
Rabbi Gamliel was sort of sent out, separated from them. He was unelected.
He was unelected.
Remember that story? Remember that story in Brachos?
Yeah.
So what's his story? Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and he embarrassed Rabbi Yeshua.
Right.
So they appointed somebody in his place. Remember who they appointed after he unelected him?
Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah.
Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah.
The youngest person.
And the youngest person. And by the way, I totally appreciate, not to compare in any way, but my hair was totally not as white before I started YU. I just want you to know. I just saw a picture of it's not like Barack Obama like, but I just saw a picture of myself before I started. I'm like, wow, I was a young man then. But so Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, we know his story. And Rabbi Akiva was the student of Rabbi Yeshua who did not want to allow Rabbi Gamliel back. So Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, they sort of all were on one side, with Rabbi Gamliel on the other side. Now, when did they live? When did these rabbis live? When did these rabbis live?
Mered Bar Kochva time.
After the Churban, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash.
What am I going to do?
After the destruction of the temple, okay, they lived. So that's why why weren't they in Jerusalem for Pesach? So temple's destroyed. They're not in Jerusalem for Pesach. They're in Lud or in Bimnei Brak. Now, was there a carbon Pesach at that time? No carbon Pesach, no temple destroyed. The rabbis told the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim all night. Rabbi Gamliel learned the halachos of carbon Pesach all night. Now, this machlokes actually bears itself out in a couple of other places. Where else do you see a debate between the rabbis and Rabbi Gamliel in reference to the Haggadah? We don't think of it as a debate, but it's actually a debate. Where else do you see a debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the rabbis of the Haggadah? The other rabbis. Okay, it's not obvious. So all you have to do is look at the next source. So if you look at the next source, you're not catching on. So if you look at the next source, the Mishnah says the Manishtana, there are 4 Manishtanot, right? 4, that's a new word, not Manishtanot, 4 questions. Okay, and after the 4 questions, source number 3, the Mishnah says, the first opinion says, the first opinion is, how do you answer Manishtana? How do we answer Manishtana, by the way? How do we answer Manishtana? How do we answer it? Kid says, why is this night different than all other nights? How do we answer the question? Yafat. Thank you, Adam. Avadim Hayinu. Avadim Hayinu. We tell the story. Why is this night different? And we tell you the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We start in the Genai, in the shameful parts. We end in the glorious parts. We're Doresh the Psukim of Aramid Ovid Avi, the story of Mitzrayim. But if you continue in the Mishnah, Rabbi Gamliel, so in our text it says Haya Omer. But actually in all of the manuscripts it doesn't say Haya. It says Rabbi Gamliel Omer, it's a debate. Rabbi Gamliel says, Kol shelo amar shlosha dvarim elu b'Pesach lo yatzidei chavaso. If you don't say 3 things, you don't fulfill the obligation. What are these things? Pesach, matzah, and mar. Why Pesach? Because God jumped over the houses. Why matzah? Because our forefathers were redeemed. Why mar? Because the Mitzrayim embittered our lives. Now let me ask you a question. What does the 3 of Rabbi Gamliel have in common? What does Pesach, matzah, and mar have in common?
They're all the foods that you eat with the Korban Pesach.
Yafet. Who said that, by the way?
Yaakov, Les.
Yaakov. So they're all foods that you eat with the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach has eaten al matzah umarim yochlu. Matzah used to be not the shmur matzah, the hard, flat shmur matzah. What was matzah? Matzah was this nice soft laffa. They put some Korban Pesach, some roasted meat. You put some bitter herbs in there. You wrapped it up. You had your Korban Pesach. That's how they ate Korban Pesach. Sounds pretty good. That's how they ate Korban Pesach. So Rabbi Gamliel says it's a very similar machlokes. The rabbis say, how do you answer Manishtana? They say, well, it's very simple. You tell the story. How does Rabbi Gamliel answer Manishtana? You have to learn about Pesach Matzah Mar. You have to learn you have to talk about how the Korban Pesach was eaten. Let me tell you one more machlokes, one more debate that's very much tied. If you keep on going to source number 5, we'll go back to 4 in a second. If you look at source number 5, Rabbi Gamliel, what he used to do, and if you look at Parak Bet Mishnah Zayin and Beitza, he used to make a gedi makulas and eat it on the night of Pesach. What is a gdi makulis? He used to take a lamb and roast it with its innards inside of it. He'd roast that to eat on the night of Pesach. And the rabbi said it was usher to eat a roasted meat. Now, do we eat roasted meat on Pesach? No. Why don't we eat roasted meat on Pesach? Why don't we eat roasted meat on Pesach?
לא קורבן, אנחנו רק זכר.
בסדר, הם עדיף לנו יכולים לדבר בעברית. זה גם...
It's not a korban. We cannot.
So it's not, we don't eat roast because we're trying to differentiate and say that we don't have the Garm Pesach today. But Rabbi Gamliel, dafka ate a roasted lamb in the same way you'd roast a Garm Pesach. So what's going on over here? What's this debate between Rabbi Gamliel and the other rabbis? And here, what you have is a fundamental machlokes. How to celebrate the holiday of Pesach once the temple was destroyed. When the temple existed, the center of the holiday was clear. What is the center of the holiday of Pesach? It's clear. It's the Korban Pesach. It's clear. It's not just a mitzvah of Ola L'Regel that people would go. People would come dafka to the Beis HaMikdash to bring the Korban Pesach and to eat the Korban Pesach in Chabura. The Gemara tells us, quoting the Brisa, that what the groups used to do is they used to all come into Jerusalem and they would rotate on the rooftops. Meaning a group would come to the rooftop, they'd eat the Korban Pesach, they'd sing Hallel, and they would leave, and the next group would come. And all over Jerusalem, on the rooftops of Jerusalem, you could hear all night people singing Hallel and eating the Korban Pesach. That was the center. The temple was the center of the whole Jewish experience for Pesach and around the year. But suddenly, an enormous tragedy happened. The temple was destroyed. Now, the temple being destroyed, if you lived during the time of the temple being destroyed, you can imagine the trauma, the pain, the disruption, the uncertainty. The whole world has just collapsed. How do you live a Jewish life without the temple? Now, this is true at any time, at any holiday, but especially for Pesach. How do you live a Jewish life on Pesach? You don't have the Korban Pesach. So there were two schools of thought that emerged. The school of Rabbi Gamliel says if you don't have the Pesach, you need to double down on the Pesach. We don't have the actual Pesach. So you know what we need to do? We need to study the laws of Pesach. Because the rabbis teach us that studying the laws of the Korban is as if you did the Korban in a time where you don't have Korbanos. And you know how you answer the Manish Tana? We have to talk about the reasons for the Pesach. Pesach, Matzah, and Mar. And we don't have the meat, the actual Pesach. We're going to do a Gedima Kulis. We're going to do the imitation Korban Pesach. If you don't have the Korban Pesach, we're going to double down on the tradition, and we're going to do as close as we can to Korban Pesach. And the other rabbis, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Azariah, they said, no, we need to change. We need to shift. We need to shift focus. There always was Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, of course. There always was a child at the Seder. There always were questions and there were answers. It wasn't the same central focus as Korban Pesach, but it was always there. So you know what we have to do in a time when you don't have the Korban Pesach? you have to shift. You have to shift accent a different part. You have to talk about the matzah. You have to talk about the seaport, the story. You have to talk about why Hashem did what he did. That's the essence of Pesach after the temple. So this is a huge machlokas. In a time of transition and turmoil, how do you continue the tradition? Do you double down and do exactly what they did before? Or do you shift within the tradition, of course, but you shift emphasis and accents? Now, this machlokas, which existed right after the temple was destroyed, I actually think exists later in the medieval era as well. And you see this if you look at the manuscripts of the Manishtana. I want to look with you together at the Manishtana. If you look back to source number 3, anybody have source number 3? Manishtana halayla zemikol leilot. By the way, do we want to find the youngest person here to read this? Would that be inappropriate? I'm looking. Who's here? Okay, I don't want to call anybody out. So the Manishtana, there are 4 questions. What's the first question? Shebecholos anu ochlim chametzu matzah, alayla ze kulo matzah. Shebecholos anu ochlim shai yirakos, alayla ze mar. Shebecholos anu ochlim basar tzli shalok u'mavushal, alayla ze kulo tzli. Shebecholos anu matpilim pam achat, or afilu pam achat, alayla ze shnei pamim. Of the 4 questions, which one in the Mishnah is different than what we say?
3.
3. Thank you, Shirley.
That was not.
What is 3? What's the third one? So the first one is chametzu matzah, we're used to. The second one is mar. The last one is being matbilin, which is also mar. What is the third one? That on all other nights we eat meat.
Lean. Leaning.
Say again? Cooked, in any way. And on this night, we only eat meat roasted. Now, this is a reference to what, of course? The Karm Pesach. Now, we don't say this one. Which one do we say? What do we say?
The leaning.
Leaning. What happened? Why did we switch the Karban Pesach Manishtana with the leaning Manishtana? Why did we switch it?
It's a storytelling.
Storytelling.
Because there's
And
no
if-
place to
if-
put it.
There's no more Karban Pesach, meaning if the whole point is storytelling, so if the whole point of Manishtana is that the kid sees it and asks, there's nothing to see. There's no Karban Pesach. So we switched. The one in the Mishnah was switched with the one of leaning. Clear. The leaning one came later. It was clear the leaning one came later. I want to show you something else. If you look at the source number 4, source number 4 is the Kaufman manuscript of the Mishnah, which is the earliest manuscript of the Mishnah that we have, the whole manuscript of the Mishnah that we have. I think it's about 10th century. So if you look at the very top line, second word on the line, look very carefully. I'll read it. Manishtana layla zemikol elos. Shebechol elos anu matbilim afilu pamachat alayla ze shtei pamim. Shebechol elos anu ochlim chametzu matzah alayla ze kulo matzah. Shebechol elos anu ochlim basar tzli shalok u'mavushal alayla ze kulo tzli. U'lefi daito shel ben aviv malamdo. What's different about this version of the Mishnah
The
than the
order,
one that appears in the Bavli Shas that you know when you think about the Mishnah?
the order is different of the order of the questions.
Order of the questions, number 1, that the Mara one about being Matzpilin Pamachas is first. That's one question. That's one difference. What else?
It's missing one of the questions.
It's missing one. How many questions are there in the Mishnah?
4.
How
And
many
this one is
questions?
3, and the other, yeah.
Exactly.
Where you-
In this version, there are only 3 questions. And what are the questions? Pesach, matzah, and mar. There are only 3 questions. Pesach, matzah, mar. If I asked you, what do you think is the most important number in the Haggadah? What would you say? What's the most
4.
important number?
4.
4. Why 4?
I've heard it's because of the house.
The kosos, the questions.
4 cups? 4
4 cups,
questions?
4 questions.
Sons.
4
4
לשונות
sons?
גאולה.
4 languages of Gula? Everybody would say 4. I postulate
It's 3.
that it used to be that the primary number was 3. That the version of when it was Carbon Pesach was the center, the primary number was 3. And it was Pesach Matzah Mar. And that's why Rabbi Gamliel says, to answer the Manishtana, what's the answer to the Manishtana of why is this night different? Why is Matzah, Mar, and Pesach different? He says, if you don't answer the kid and tell him what Pesach, Matzah, and Mar are, you're not Yotzei the obligation. Rabbi Gamliel's version of the Mishnah was 3. 3 was the central number. Maybe at another time, in another place, I'll share with you that the Arba Banim might originally have been 3. If you think about the Arba Banim, one doesn't fit. Which one doesn't fit in the Arba Banim?
Shano Yudei Elishol.
Russia.
The Russia.
The Russia.
Because the Chacham, the Tam, and the Shei Elishal are 3 gradations of intelligence. The Russia is not about intelligence. It could have been that the first Brisa was actually 3, and then the Russia came after. It's a whole other conversation we can talk about another time. But 3 is Rabbi Gamliel's Shita, because that's Carbon Pesach. Now, there might have been a lot of other medieval reasons why they didn't like the number 3. 3 carried very bad connotations in Christian Europe, and that's a whole other conversation. I'll leave to David Zirkin to invite Dr. Berger at least to talk about. But it became 4. But what's interesting is that there are versions of the Haggadah, medieval manuscripts of the Haggadah, where actually there are only 3 questions in the Manishtana, and not 4. There are only 3. And I think it's this debate of Rabbi Gamliel and the rabbis, meaning to what extent do you still focus on Pesach, Matzah, and Mar, even after the Carbon Pesach doesn't exist? Do you double down into the tradition, even when the tradition doesn't exactly work? Or do you shift and change the accent? Again, within the tradition, but in a different way. What do we paskin like? What do we do? Do we hold like Rabbi Akiva and his friends? Or do you hold like Rabbi Gamliel and his friends? What do we do?
Both.
Yafet. We do both. It's the best Jewish answer to a question. He's right. He's right. They're both right. We do both. And why do we do both? We mentioned Rabbi Gamliel and his 3 things. And we mentioned the rabbis and they stayed up all night for Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because in a time of turmoil and change, okay, we need to be both. We need to double down on the tradition and we need to shift and change. We need to do both. Okay, and it's the rabbis and their genius that did both that actually saved the Jewish people after the destruction of the temple. There was a real threat. Wow, Ellie Strauss, how you doing? I haven't seen you in so long. There was a real threat of Judaism. Will Judaism survive or not? Will Judaism survive or not? And it was the rabbis who said, I know Jerusalem's destroyed, but let me save the tradition. It's the rabbis who worked out how to double down and how to shift. It was because of their ingenuity and their greatness that we were able to continue and survive. The destruction of the temple could have augured the end of Judaism. But they were able to both continue the tradition and shift and grow in a way that continued the Masorah and enabled Yadus to survive, and Bezrat Hashem, like today, I would say, to thrive. Now, who are the heroes of the Haggadah? Who is mentioned most in the Haggadah? Is it Moshe? Is it Miriam? Is it Hashem? Or is it the rabbis? Look at all the rabbis that are mentioned in the Haggadah. The Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva, the Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the Rabbi Gamliel. Look at all the paragraphs of the rabbis in the Haggadah. And they are the hidden heroes of the Haggadah, because it's their ingenuity that enabled Judaism to survive. And I want you to think about this, because there's something so clever that happens in the Haggadah. If I asked you, how would you tell over the story of Mitzrayim? Right? We know Chayav Adam Leor Satatzmo, you're obligated to see yourself as if you left Egypt, right? Okay, if you were seeing yourself as if you left Egypt, what would you do? How would you tell the story? You would tell the story like you left Egypt. How would you tell the story of Mitzrayim? You talk about Moshe. You talk about Miriam. You'd read the Psukim in Shemos. Read about the story. We don't read the story. We are Doresh the story. We learn the story from the Psukim of Arame Ovid Abi. Let me ask you something else. You mentioned the Arba Kosos. Why do we recline during the Arba Kosos? Why do we recline during the Arba Kosos? Why do you think we recline?
Symbol of being free.
How is leaning to the left when you drink wine a symbol of being free? When was that a symbol of being free?
During the times of the symposium.
Yafeh, exactly. Good Torah U'Mada quote. It was during the times of the symposium. It was in the Roman era, right? It was, or the Greek era, but I'm saying the Roman era was the time where reclining to your left was how free people drank wine. It wasn't how they did it in Egypt. In fact, we are not imagining ourselves as if we left Egypt. We're actually imagining ourselves if we're the rabbis who are telling over the story of how the Jews left Egypt. There's a story within a story that's happening in the Haggadah. We actually don't tell the story of Mitzrayim. We tell how the rabbis told over the story of Mitzrayim. That's what we're doing. The whole story is how the rabbis told over the story of Mitzrayim. They stayed up all night and did Sipur Mitzrayim. They would Doresh Arame Ovid Avi. They learned it's not just 10 makos, it's 50 makos. We don't tell the story. We tell the story as the rabbis told the story of Mitzrayim, as they did in their period. They're the hidden heroes of the Haggadah. Why? Because b'chol davar dar, omdim aleinu l'chal oseinu. Because the story of Mitzrayim didn't just happen once. It continues and it happens in every generation. And the heroes of the Haggadah are the heroes who saved the Jewish people in every generation. It didn't just happen in Mitzrayim. It happened after the temple was destroyed too. And it continued to happen and continues to happen today. There are many heroes in the Haggadah. It's those that ensure the Masorah. The chain of our tradition continues. It's every father and mother and son and daughter. It's every connection where this story is passed down from one to the other so that the Jewish people live on. They're the heroes of the Haggadah. It's not just Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's the rabbis after the Churban, and it's the continuity of the Masorah, the link in the chain today. And just like the rabbis did it then, being deeply rooted and forward focused, deeply rooted in our tradition and values and forward focused into applying our values into our reality today, that is the combination that has ensured the survival of the Jewish people. I'm going to end with one last thought about the Haggadah. My argument is that the Haggadah isn't really just about Mitzrayim. It's about Jewish history. And that the rabbis, after the Churban, that whole first part of the first half of the Haggadah, hidden is a celebration of that continuity. Now, there are actually two parts of the Haggadah. There's the part before the meal and the part after the meal. Now, the part before the meal is focused on the redemption from Mitzrayim. It's the Jews leave Egypt. We tell the story, we Dorish the story. We sing Hallel for their leaving. And then we eat. What happens after the meal? We bench. And then we say Shvo Chamascha. What is Shvo Chamascha? What is that a harbinger of? Shvo Chamascha? Who do we open the door to for Shvo Chamascha?
Mashiach.
Mashiach.
Elio is bringing him.
Elio, Mashiach. We say Shvo Chamascha. Nishmas Kol Chai. T'varech Hashemcha. Not just, we say the Hal HaGadol. Everyone is going to praise God. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuya. The Haggadah is the expanse of Jewish history. It starts with Avram, or really with Terach. It continues through Mitzrayim. And then you eat, because Jews eat. And then it talks about the future, and the future Geula, Mashiach. It's the whole expanse of Jewish history. And taken as a whole, it speaks to our mission, which is to move Jewish history forward, which is to take the time of Mitzrayim, to continue the chain through the rabbis, passing down from parent to child, and to bring it to L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim habnuya. That's the Haggadah, from beginning to end. Now, what's amazing in this time period, where do you think we are in the story? Where is our generation in the story? Are we before the meal or after the meal? Are we in the time where we're just talking about the story of Mitzrayim as our redemption? Or have we already turned the corner and we're on the other side of the page? When we say every week in Shul that we're living in a time of Reshit Tzmichat Gulateinu, when we recognize that the state of Israel and the return of the Jews to our homeland and the Kibbutz Galiot isn't just a nice historical fact, but actually signals a shift in the history of the Jewish people. And that our mission is closer to the end today than it ever was before. Then this feeling of completing the story, of moving the chain forward, of completing the mission, should be energizing, in part of our everyday life. And that is a primary message that we give to the students at Yeshiva University, the next generation of leaders, and that we should be giving to all of our children. I call it Torah Tzion. I talk in yeshiva, as Michal knows. Where's Michal? She's in charge of pushing forward the project of the 5 Torahs, the 5 core values of our community. I won't go into all of them now, but truth, life, infinite human worth, compassion, and redemption. That we believe that our purpose is not just Tzion to build Israel, but Israel itself is a vehicle for Geula, for redemption to the world. And one can fulfill their mission of bringing redemption in many ways. You could, of course, make Aliyah. We encourage people to make Aliyah. You could support Israel wherever you live, APAC, Stucca, institutions. Of course, it's a fulfillment. But another way, if one lives here, is you can Makadeh Shem Shemayim Barabim, is you could sanctify God's name in the world and spread God's values to the world. That too is part of the mission. The mission of Geula, of redemption, isn't just for the Jewish people. It's for everyone. Nishmas Kolchai. It's for everyone. And during Pesach, we need to embrace the enormous possibilities of our era, which is to take our mission, our values, and our ideals, and to spread them to the next generation, to the Jewish people as a whole, and to the broader society. This is the goal. It's to take from Mitzrayim to the rabbis, to continue to get to the end of the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim Habnuya. And if we're thinking about, in a time of COVID, what is my mission? What is my purpose? Why am I here? I can think of no better answer than to say that I am attaching myself to the greatest story in the history of the world, which is the story of the Jewish people. That my mission and my purpose is to advance the story of the Jewish people, is to go from Shulchan Aruch, where we eat and have a great meal, and move us to Shvo Chamascha, to Nishmas Kolchai, to the Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim Habnuya. That should fuel our mission. Everything we do should be seen in that context. And that's what we're inspiring our students, that the flagship Jewish university, to be the next generation of leaders who will carry our mission and move it forward. This is what our community is about. This is what our education is about. And it's certainly what our Pesach Seder is fundamentally about. And my hope is that we gather together to work on this great project of spreading our values, sanctifying God's name in the public sphere, and moving history forward, so that when we come to next year, we can all sing on the rooftops, the Shana Haba, or the Shana Hazot, I should say, Yerushalayim Habnuya. Thank you so much.
Amen.
So wonderful to be with you.
Yashikar, Amen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Berman.
Thank you so much to Rabbi Berman for leading us tonight. Part 2 will be next year, Erev Pesach, to talk about the Russia. We're excited for that. I think everyone here would love to continue. We'll talk about that offline. But we're so honored that Rabbi Berman was here to learn with us, to inspire our Pesach Seders this year. I have no doubt that this conversation this evening will reverberate among your tables as we all celebrate Pesach next week. I'm just posting in the chat one final time our resource guide for Pesach, and I want to particularly highlight Sunday night's Shabbos Haggadah Drasha on the theme of Hallel, and Monday evening we'll be gathering to study the Haggadah for one final time as a group, sponsored by the Tessel family in memory of Susan's mother, but also in memory of Rabbi Sachs For those who are registering through the link that we just posted in the chat, you'll be able to receive a copy of Rabbi Sachs's Haggadah from Koren, a very beautiful edition and a great addition to your collection of Haggadot. So please make sure to register and join us Sunday evening and Monday evening. If you have questions about Mechiras Chametz or anything else you need to help prepare for Pesach properly, please make sure to reach out to us in the office so we can make sure everyone has all that they need to celebrate Pesach in the best possible way. Thank you to Yeshiva University for tonight's program. Thank you to Rabbi Dr. Ari Berman for the special honor of being with us. Thank you to one and all. Chag Kasher V'Sameach. And we really hope to see you all in person very soon. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you so much.